What's up, ladies and gentlemen? What's the first thing you think of when you hear Wetzel County? For many, you might think of the gas industry, you might think of the once thriving glass industry, or you might think of a certain super handsome amateur historian. But for me, I think of the many mysteries and unsolved crimes from the county, one of which, the Wetzel County Jane Doe, I've already covered. But in my research, I discovered one of the first major historical events in Wetzel County after West Virginia became a state was an unsolved murder. So today we're going to talk about the Jennings Gang and the unsolved murder of John Jennings, who was maybe or maybe not the gang's actual leader. So for this video, we're going to have to go all the way back to the 1800s, and we're going to have to talk about one John Jennings. He had migrated to Wetzel County from Monongalia County, him and his family, and he was seen as a pretty outstanding member of the community. That was up until the Civil War. When the Civil War first broke out, John and his son Thomas both quickly joined the Union cause. Within about 6 months, both of them would desert, though, and just head back to Wetzel County. Once they had returned to Wetzel County, forces and authorities were actually sent to try and find and round up deserters, but the father and son duo was able to evade authorities, mostly due to their vast knowledge of the Wetzel County backwoods. This was until Abraham Lincoln made a proclamation that allowed deserters to come back to their units and not face any type of criminal repercussions. John Jennings very quickly did this, and after that he was treated pretty much like garbage. He claimed that he was forced to set up camp away from the rest of the troops, and even said that upon the war finishing and him returning home, he was thrown over a boat and forced to swim to shore and walk the rest of the way home. Thomas, on the other hand, never actually rejoined his unit. He chose to just roam the backwoods and hide out in Wetzel County until the end of the war. And at some point during this time, him and two of his brothers, Jackson and Frank Jennings, would start committing robberies and breaking into rural country stores. And it was during this point that the family started being seen as a bunch of outlaws. Because, they were. And these three brothers formed what became known as the Jennings Gang, and they actually had a pretty good operation going. See, Wetzel County is in the middle of nowhere. If you want to get to Wheeling, well, you gotta travel the better part of an hour north. If you want to get to Parkersburg, you gotta travel the better part of an hour south. Morgantown, Fairmont, Bridgeport, Clarksburg, any of those places, you're gonna have to travel about an hour. And that's with modern roads and transportation. At this point, it would take hours, maybe even the better part of a day to make that travel. So when authorities would be sent to try and round up the Jennings Gang, they would just escape to the back hills and forests of Wetzel County and just set up shop somewhere else. The gang's crimes would eventually catch up with them when they tried robbing one George Forbes. He was a traveling cattle merchant out of Wheeling. Now, at some point during this robbery, gunfire started. Forbes was hit a couple times and was very critically injured. Now, he would escape, make a full recovery, and use his money and influence to actually pursue and get arrest of the Jennings Gang. Thomas and Frank were both charged with grand larceny and were sent to the newly formed and still under construction West Virginia State Penitentiary. Now, both these brothers actually saw this as more of a networking opportunity than a punishment. They would use this time in the penitentiary to share stories of their successes in both robberies and highwaymanship in order to recruit criminals from essentially all over the state, as far south as Kanawha County, to join their gang upon their release from the penitentiary. Now, eventually, Frank Jennings would just escape the penitentiary. There is a story of how one night there was a severe windstorm that knocked over one of the stockade walls, and he was able to dodge gunfire and escape that way. I don't know how true that story is. And on the other hand, Thomas Jennings just fell sick and ended up dying in the penitentiary. Once Frank Jennings was free, he quickly went back to work reestablishing his criminal enterprise. He had new spies and informants from all across the state, along with some individuals, which, if the authorities came after him, would either feed them false information or in some cases would actually blackmail them in order to avoid getting arrested. And things were going pretty good for him until a newspaper in New Martinsville called the Labor Vindicator actually started releasing these anonymously written articles claiming that John Jennings, the father of the boys, was actually the leader of the gang and had been seen roaming the countryside of Wetzel County prior to some of these major robberies. Now, up until this point, it was unknown if John Jennings actually had any association with his son's gang. But after these articles came out, a lot of people kind of suspected him to be part of this criminal organization. And he kind of handled the whole ordeal in the worst way possible. See, he went down to the newspaper's office and demanded that the editor turn over the names of the people who had worked on the article. The editor, of course, refused to turn over the names, and some of the authorities in New Martinsville actually told John Jennings, look, you're being watched right now. People want you to kind of lose your cool so that they can have more of a reason to pursue you. And John Jennings kind of reacted the worst way possible. He made a major scene. He started issuing threats to certain New Martinsville authorities. And this was actually enough for the citizens of Wetzel County to take up arms and form a mob. And on June 12, 1873, a group of vigilantes actually broke into the Jennings household where they tried to restrain John Jennings. And at some point during this tussle, John Jennings' wife actually attempted to throw an axe to her husband so he could defend himself, at which point the vigilantes opened up fire on Jennings, killing him instantly and severely injuring his wife. Now, she would make a full recovery. The next day, newspapers across the area would report on the murder of John Jennings, but that wasn't the end of the story. This mob actually continued to roam Wetzel County for several days, rounding up other known members of the gang and actually burning down known hideouts for the gang. And these events were highly publicized, leading people to kind of wonder what in the world is going on in Wetzel County. And this is more so where the story actually ends. It is reported that several members of the gang, last time they were contacted, were actually in the South, which it doesn't give. Is that southern West Virginia? Is that like southern United States? Did they make it to Brazil? And while doing research for this video, I found out that there was a fourth Jennings son named John Michael Jennings, who was actually present at the time of his father's murder, but wasn't chased out of the county. In fact, he continued to live in Wetzel County and passed in 1946. Now, to this day, names of the vigilantes in this gang have never been released. It has been kind of one of the best well-kept secrets in Wetzel County. Therefore, the murder of John Jennings has never been solved. But until next time, don't forget to stay wild and stay wonderful, and hopefully here real soon we can start doing some outdoor adventures again once travel becomes advisable again. And I'll talk to you later.